Greg and Richard right here on Talking Red.
Hello and welcome to Talking Reds, a Nottingham Forest podcast hosted by myself, Greg Oram, and fellow Forest fan from across the Atlantic, Richard Sprague.
60% of the time, it works every time. Every time. Every time.
Hold up. Wait a minute.
I mean, look at that guy, how handsome he is. I'll kiss him. I'll kiss him.
You stay classy, San Diego.
That Sex Panther is great stuff, you know. If you try it 60% of the times, it works every time. How you doing, Richard?
Ooh. Yeah, it's just, I mean, it's such a journey when we get to hear those intros. It's amazing what you come up with, man. You're a true artist. Thank you.
I know it's not for everyone, and we know one or two people think, well, what is that? But this is Talking Reds. It's a little bit different on this side of the channel, guys. So strap yourselves in because we're going to do more of that as we go along. The fourth round showed us that the magic of the cup is still alive as Plymouth took out Liverpool and Leyton Orient scared the life out of Manchester City. And then last night, Nottingham Forest up against League One strugglers Exeter City definitely did it the hard way. After a tough, good old-fashioned English cup tie, saw extra time and penalties, and the Reds eventually into the fifth round. So we're going to look back on all of the talking points and reflect on what has to be described as a lucky escape. And then, in the second part of the episode, we turn our attention to Saturday and Forest's visit to Craven Cottage to face Fulham in the Premier League. We may be joined later by Paul Morley for that, but in the meantime, we have with us regular contributor Raf the Random Pundit.
How rude. Ichuta. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering. 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 No, I am your father.
It's like an epic all in one go, I think, isn't it? Sometimes. Raf, how you doing?
Do you know what? Probably less sleep than I thought I'd get last night, but other than that, absolutely brilliant. And I do love that quote from Yoda, which pretty much epitomizes how Twitter is at the moment after that game against Exeter. And
I'm glad you picked it out because I thought suffering was something that
honestly, yeah. And
Forest fans know all about suffering, but it's been a while since we kind of felt it a little bit. Right, we're going to get into all that very soon. If you're still with us after the mega intros, thank you for sticking around. I want to say hello to you, so please do drop yourselves into the comments so we know who's here and we can say hello to you if we can. If you're coming to us later on the playback through Apple or Spotify or, of course, YouTube, thank you very much for being with us as well.
Please do go ahead and hit like and subscribe to be sure not to miss any future episodes from Talking Reds.
Jumping straight into it then, last night, Richard, we went to the League One opposition, Exeter, the final tie in the FA Cup. We'd already seen Liverpool crash out, as I said, against Plymouth, and Leyton Orient giving Man City a scare. Birmingham, who are, traditionally a sizable club, but albeit they're in League One at the moment, giving Newcastle a game and a half. Southampton going out to Burnley, albeit, Burnley are still a league lower. So it's the FA Cup. The magic of the FA Cup is alive and well. And all of a sudden, just before kickoff, I posted in our group, I had those kind of Tuesday night jitters, FA Cup jitters away from home in a game that we should comfortably be taken care of. It kind of hit me that something was in the air. And so let's come to you for your overall thoughts on how that all developed last night.
Yeah, I mean, it's just an uncharacteristic performance, right? I mean, we're just not used to that kind of, I don't know, lack of execution, lack of intensity. I mean, there's moments of execution. I mean, the Taiwo goal was excellent, in terms of how he managed that and scored. And, just very uneven, very, just the differential between the performances of our second unit compared to our first just was so evident. And, it's don't want to get too caught up and become prisoner of the moment and worry that, all of a sudden, if we had to utilize these players for an extended period of time, we're going to be in serious jeopardy. I don't necessarily think that's true because we've seen enough of how they played against Premier League sides to know that some of those players are very, very effective. So, yeah, just in general, it's very frustrating, very, very, lackluster performance. But you know what? In the end, we got it through it. We won the match. We move on. We regroup and we do what we always do, which is kind of recenter and get back to playing, very elite football in the next Premier League match against Fulham.
So, Ref, there were 10 changes from the last game in the Premier League against Brighton. Danilo keeping his place. 10 changes too much for you? I mean, it's easy to say in hindsight, but how are you feeling when the team came out? Sangare got the start in the middle of the midfield. Danilo looked like he was kind of pushed more advanced. General thoughts on that team shape and that personnel going into this one?
Well, the 10 changes, we did 10 changes last round, right? So I don't think it's anything new. And, Nuno has a very excellent point, is the fact that everyone needs minutes. And so you need to share the minutes around. And as we get into the run-in, it's going to be vital that some of these players have had minutes in their legs for them to be the most effective when they come on. So I do think it's completely the right approach. We wouldn't be all up in arms if we had basically won 2-1, right? And you wouldn't have to bring on the first teamers and it would have been job done. But I do think you're missing a bit of context here of before the game, and your jitters are quite right. You're going down to Exeter. The coach ride's got to be, 6 hours or something, probably, or something mental to get down there, which can never help in terms of preparation. People were getting home from the game at like 4 a.m, afterwards, 4 or 5 a.m. And the pitch was waterlogged all down the middle of it. You're kicking balls and it was either sand or water that's flying up from the ball. You've got their main rivals have just put out Liverpool. So they're on a one-upmanship bandwagon of like, well, we can't be shown up by our rivals who've now got a massive scout. We're going to go for it. The whole thing was set up to be far more difficult than if anyone thought we were just going to walk in and just smash them 3-4-5-0 and then walk out. I don't think was ever going to happen. So I do think they were given a chance. We had the big guns on the bench, which Liverpool didn't do. We had to use them. It's not ideal. But ultimately, I don't think it was a wrong game plan. I just think the fact that we didn't quite get the job done in the way that we wanted to. We'll come on to a little bit of why that might have been the case, but ultimately I wouldn't have changed anything and I think it was fine.
No, I was happy with the team. It was kind of how I expected it to be. I expected Toffolo to play as a third centre-back, but he was actually playing as a centre-back partnership with Bolly, which was a bit of a surprise, but I thought Toffolo did well. I've seen 1 or 2 comments on social media about him that haven't been so positive, and I actually think he comes out of the game with credit. I think he was one of our better players, to be honest with you. We want to get into the whys and wherefores. We are spending only the first half of the podcast on the Exeter game before we switch to Fulham. A quick hello to Glenn Hancock, who's with us. Yeah, thoughts with Taiwo. it does look like it was a nasty one. We'll talk about that a little bit more as well. The intros are always going to be there. And Bruce, we want you to unpack what's going on in those intros. Good afternoon, Dan Scape, who would be with us normally, but he's not feeling particularly well. So his throat isn't doing too well at the moment. Richard, the whys and wherefores then. We didn't do ourselves any favours. I thought, I mean, literally, it's easy for me to say this, but genuinely, the boys on the right-hand side, the Exeter right, and they're kind of hovering around on the edge. And I said to Orlando as we were watching it, they're going to score here. And the ball come lofting over, and it was almost like I could just had my Jedi senses on. And Carlos Miguel comes out, and yeah, it's a really bad goalkeeping error for him to drop the ball like that and put it on a plate for McGuinness to score. Can you kind of unpack that a little bit and maybe give us an opinion on why that might have happened for Miguel? I mean, it's just an opinion. Could it be rust?
Yeah, I mean, I look at the series that leads up to that, right? So it's a perfect sort of summary of how that match went. You've got a very effective aerial player in Willie Ball not being able to head the ball over a smaller player in that aerial duel that occurred. That goes into the sort of the corner of our final third. Moreira kind of slipping, not really getting good position, playing like an 18-year-old footballer, gives up some space. The guy crosses it in instead of Miguel standing right there to palm the ball. And then if he gets that, it's done and dusted in terms of that series, right? Likely they don't score. But instead, Bali steps in front of him, kicks it out, gets a corner. They get the corner. They eventually retain possession off that corner, and then they score because Miguel, I'm just going to attribute it to, I just think he's not played very much. He's obviously knows, okay, these are critical moments for me to prove that I have the ability to play, at least show some life, show some spark, show some, capability. And I just think he lost concentration. Raf knows because we watch NFL quite a bit. You see this with wide receivers, right? They're ready to move with the ball to start their next action before they've even actually got the ball in their hands. And I just think he wasn't concentrating, and that unfortunately dropped perfectly for their striker to put it in. So I wouldn't say it's like the worst thing I've seen, obviously, from a Forest keeper in the last since we've been in the Premier League, but it definitely didn't avail himself well in terms of the ability to build confidence. But at the same time, I just don't. I think we're probably being a little bit hypercritical. It's just a poor moment and lack of concentration, a lapse of sort of awareness and execution.
I've seen a load of comments chucked his way on how bad he was, bad game, and I've seen some really extreme comments, which I have to push back on, if I'm honest with you, because I felt that he had one bad moment and nothing else to do in the game until their second goal, and the ball comes over, and from quite a close range, he saved the header. And from that kind of range, it's not like he can put it wide or put it over. He's pushed it back out into the only area he probably could push it out to, and then of course he's come back in and Bolly scored the own goal. We'll talk more about that in detail shortly. But for me, I can't say he had a bad game, because I think and I've seen one comment that he's not going to start another Forest game, which I find bizarre. If I'm honest with you, I expect him to start against Ipswich in the next round. I do.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I just think, unless there's something behind the scenes we don't know about. I mean, I know he's come off with a so-called hamstring, and I've even seen people suggest that maybe he's faked that. Look, it could be that for some reason he hasn't fancied it, and he's made more of it, but we don't know that. We have to trust that. Look, if he's felt something and his hamstring's gone or whatever it is that he needs to come off, then he's done the right thing by coming off. But I kind of feel like he's gone a little bit over the top, Richard, on Miguel. All of a sudden, one bad moment, and he's just as bad as all the other bad keepers we've had. When in fact, he's had limited game time. This is only his third appearance for Forest. And against Luton, I thought he had a good game. Against Newcastle, we had an excellent game. And I still stand by the fact that I do not blame him for that first goal against Newcastle. I don't. People will say, well, they gave up the first goal. I don't believe that. I don't have that opinion. So I'm really kind of getting behind Miguel here, and I stand with Carlos Miguel. I think he's a good keeper, and there'll be more from him. Do you think that he'll come back against Ipswich, Richard?
I think he will, because I mean he's got the right manager to do that. He's got a former goalkeeper. He understands. I mean, he can definitely empathize with him. I mean, I haven't spent an exorbitant amount of time watching Nuno highlights, so I don't know, in terms of how many times that may have happened to him, if ever. But if you contrast that moment with what happened with Sells against Bournemouth, I mean, the one with Sells, it was a shot, but it was a very savable shot, and he pushed it right in front of him, and then the guy scored. I think it was Semenyo that scored, or Ouattara. But it was just like those kinds of things. It's like we get so caught up in the fact that because this guy doesn't play very much, because he is the second man on the totem pole, as it were, that it's easy to become, hypercritical of him because he just doesn't have a whole lot of opportunity to really show what he's capable of doing. And there's just so little known about, what the team thinks of him, comprehensively. But it just, if Sells had done that, we probably wouldn't have been very pleased, but we could shrug it off and be like, okay, based off of the history and the consistency of performance that Sells had, we don't quite register the same level of sort of assessment. But it's one that he'll want to forget. You move on. You find a better way to take your game to another level in the next match and avail yourself there. And I think he will.
Yeah, I hope so. So, Raf, Sangare's back in the team, or getting his first start for a while, and you were feeling quite happy with his passing ability, and he was very much involved for Forest coming back into the game. So just talk us through the Sosa goal and Sangare's influence.
So very, 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 very quickly on Miguel, I think people have got very short memory that when Sells came in, he was not good, right? And it took him time to get. I've given a huge piece on it as well, like evidencing it. He was not good. And it took him time to bed in, and he needed games, and he needed consistency running the team to be able to come better. I don't blame Miguel. There is a keeper in there, but Nuno did give him daggers down the touchline as he was hobbling back to the bench. So there is probably something to unpack in there. So let's see if he does start the next game or whatever it is. Anyway, Sangare, I'm so pleased for him. I genuinely, you can only do what you can do of the players that are in front of you that you're playing. We got the Sangare back that we saw glimpses of just before he got injured and when he came in, and what he is very good at when he was at PSV. And he was the entire creative force of the team in the first half. Balls were very quickly, decision-making very quickly, huge progressive passing. And on the ground, arcing forward, cross-ball passes, the whole range was in there. Now, some people will say, well, it was Exeter, it's really easy to do, right? Well, you can still only do what you can do. And also, he's doing that with players that he's not playing. He's only just come back, so he's not probably got that rhythm, playing with them week in, week out, know where they're running to, and he's still executing like that. The issue that's been levelled against him is when he hasn't got the ball, his speed with which to be able to be that six and basically destroyer, enforcer, whatever you want to call them, to basically go get back the ball. He actually fouled a number of times trying to get the ball back. So, but that is the bit that will come with more game time and fitness and sharpness. And that bit will hopefully come back. The vision and the ability to be able to pass and execute that, that's just DNA class that's there. So the class is there. It's beginning to show. The next question is, when he gets put into Premier League games, can he execute in that way again?
He's not going to have the same kind of space or time to do that in the Premier League.
He won't, Greg, but we don't know yet. So there's so many players. Look at Moreno, look at others that were not up to speed yesterday. And it is a Forest thing that we raise our level or lower level depending on who we seem to be playing. And there may be an element in there, but I'm not going to write off the fact that he can't do it until we've actually given him a chance back to go show that he can do it. And for me, I was really pleased with what he did yesterday.
Yeah, I was pleased. Sorry, Rich, I just want to quickly say I was pleased with what he did as well. I mean, it's undeniable. You can only play what's in front of you. You're playing Exeter and you're playing on a sandy pitch that a lot of our players were struggling on. And in the first half, Sangare stood out And so therefore he needs to pat on the back for that. But I will say we're playing against Exeter and we're playing on a sandy pitch. And, you know, I'm not saying that he's prime, you know, Zidane. When he plays in the Premier League, it's going to be a different ball game. And that's all I'm saying. I'm not putting a negative spin on it at all, because, you know, I still feel like he's too slow, and I still feel like he's, for me personally, not what we need. For me, he's down the pecking order behind our midfield that we've been using all season. I don't think he's going to do enough to force that in. I'm going to come to you, Rich, because I know you want to jump in, but I want to quickly pull this up because Danscape's going back to Miguel and saying that he thinks Miguel has got off lightly compared to Turner, having made the same mistake. And I'm going to push back on that, Dan, because had Turner made that mistake and it was his first mistake, I'd be saying the same thing as well. Turner made a whole plethora of mistakes. So you can't compare Miguel and Turner. It's not the same thing at all. Turner would still be getting my support if he was in that goal last night and made that mistake and it was his first mistake. But the problem is Turner made mistake after mistake after mistake. And so it's not the same thing at all. You're comparing apples and pears, if I'm honest with you. So they're not the same thing at all. When Miguel makes another 3 or 4 errors, then he'll get the same kind of heat that I gave Turner. I'm hoping that won't happen. Richard, you want to jump in?
Well, I just keep thinking, you know, sorry, I'm dipping into these like thoughts around American football as analogous to some of these things. But when you play in a college at a university level and then you move to the NFL, there's such a difference in terms of, we know this, league to league, even from, you know, Eredivisie versus Premier League, the ability to get those reps. It's not just about the physical fitness. That is a huge part. It's also about the mental reps, because when you're a guy that typically doesn't have the makeup speed, so you contrast it with, say, Murillo, right? There's not a whole lot of moments where if he gets turned around, he can't make up that ground quickly. And he's a deceptively fast player, right? Similar situation to Aina. You know, if he gets a guy who's good on the ball and he gets turned around a little bit, he's going to make up that ground. I think what Sangare hopefully will do over time is he'll be able to understand the right angles. He'll be able to understand where he's going to position himself so he knows he can overcome that just slightly, right? I mean, it's a little alarming when you're playing a League One side, but look, smaller guys who tend to be faster, they can exist all over at any level, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean all the rest of the skills that they're going to need is there in order to be successful at a higher level of football. But it's just going to be one of those things. I tend to kind of agree with you, Greg, in terms of the worry that that's going to be a huge part of a hole in his game that makes it difficult to him to ascend up the depth chart, as it were, and have more opportunities. But I mean, to Raf's point, the precision, the weight of the passes, the angle of the passes, the mind to do that is there. It's just going to be a question of can he, and I'm just excited to see as he starts to get more, you know, logged minutes, because versus like a Dominguez, who's had way more time on the pitch and he's had the opportunity to prove himself significantly, and there's just still that unknown simply based off of injury. But I think he can do it. I think the mind is there. It's just the execution against a higher caliber player. We'll see whether that happens. But I do think there's just a huge part of mental reps that one gets that when you get on the pitch that helps you play the game more in a more intellectual way, a little bit more, you know, with a greater acuity.
Thank you very much to Wayway NFFC Mark for the £5 donation. Very generous of you. He says he's going to be at Fulham. He's looking forward to seeing Murillo, Milenkovic, Aina, Alanga, and all of them back in the starting lineup. We agree with you, brother. Steve-O says Sangare and Yates had more touches in less than one game than they get in 2 or 3 Premier League games. Not being pressed won't happen often. I agree with you there. The fact is, we were playing against a League One midfield that wanted us to have the ball. When their manager came out, Raf, before the game, and we spoke about this before we came on, he said, Forest like to be a team that has low possession and hit you on the counter. And he more or less said that that's what they're going to try and do to us. And so, just, you know, time's moving us on. Sosa gets us back into the game. Sangare plays a lovely ball through. And Sosa again is showing that he can come in off that left-hand side, cut across, and he scores the goal. I mean, their keeper gets a touch on it. He's only 5'10", their keeper, and he did okay. I think they were kind of going a little bit over the top about him being this exceptional keeper. He did all right. I don't think we tested him anywhere near enough as what we should have done. And then one thing he did do really well was save the shot from Taiwo. I mean, that going into the corner before we made it 2-1. And then Taiwo gets his goal. And that really was lovely play, Raf, I thought, with Tyro shifting it quickly onto his left foot and banging it into the goal. So all of a sudden, we're 2-1 up, and it looks like we've turned it around. Did you feel like we were going to go on and score 2 or 3 more?
No, well, this is again what I said at half time was, look, and everyone was going, oh, who are we going to sub on, etc., etc., etc. But I was just like, right, it's the next goal. If we get another goal, we're absolutely cruising. If we get another goal. But again, this is their Wembley final. They're going to have the most massive team talk at half time. They're going to come out fully charging. And no matter what Nuno says, it's not going to be as rousing as what's happening in that Exeter locker room. And so I'm not surprised there was a response from the Exeter team. But at the same time, also, it's just this Forest thing where we just raise our level to just enough, especially if it's not in against Premier League opposition. The Cups, we do it the whole time. So it didn't surprise me. But what I am pleased about is we did concede really early on. And we did come back, and that's a mentality which we found difficult because we scored first the whole time. It's something different, and the squad actually stepped up and got the lead back. Now, we did concede it again. But at the same time, look, there are enough players that just weren't necessarily on it. But I'm not going to slam them. Like I've seen the amount of comments going, we need to buy 8 players in the summer, right? No, we don't. Right? Again, it's a cup game against a team that will always want it more than us. There's no way we can want it more than them. It's just never going to happen, right? On a crap pitch, right? Very partisan crowd, massive journey, a night, very cold. No one really wants to be there. You just want to get in, get out. That's not the best mentality. So it just happened. The penalty we got, basically, there was what is the slight worry, but again, it is very explainable, is especially when they're down to 10 men, they are literally just camping in front of their box. And we've seen the best, like Liverpool, not be able to break us down when we do that to them, right? They can't do it. So it is a bit of a, creating goals, but some of the interplay with Anderson and Gibbs-White pinging stuff between them and just creating holes and everything, you could see they're a class above. It's just still very difficult to find enough when you've got 4 bodies in front of you inside the penalty area. But the long and the short of it is we got to penalties. There were a lot of doom mongers out there going, it's penalties, we're going to lose. But, we had our first team on. And at the end of the day, there were 4 absolutely class penalties, right? And, Morgan Gibbs-White, for all the jitters that maybe from penalties that he's missed in the past, absolutely cheeky, stone cold. And if you saw in his run up as well, he stood there and he was deep breathing to bring his heart rate right down before he did it as well. It's absolutely brilliant, right? Really and very good knowledge to do that and take control of the situation of what he wanted to do. Sells was absolutely brilliant as well. Got his hand to the first one, even though he was so power. Saved another one. Like he was absolutely brilliant. So at the end of the day, it is really what it is. I'm not overly surprised. It would have been nice not to have to put the players on, but we get in, we got out. It was a long journey back. It's a bit unfortunate. I do think it's unfair that Fulham have basically an extra nearly 3 days worth of recovery after their game than us. But do you know what? Swings and roundabouts. We had that with other teams that we played in the Premier League beforehand. We suck it up and we go again. Yeah.
Paul Morley is with us.
There is one other thing. One more question, sir. Oh, there's one more. Thing, sir. One more thing.
How you doing, Paul? Good to have you with us.
Morning, Richard. How you doing?
Yeah, doing good. Great to see you, buddy.
We haven't quite rounded off the Exeter game yet, so you can join on the end of this. But I want to come quickly over to you, Richard, because a few more talking points quickly to kind of like round off their second goal. It was the thing that kind of really gave them that hope and that kind of like upsurge, wasn't it? Because the ball's come over from the corner and the scramble, the header I mentioned earlier, I thought Carlos Miguel did well to save that. And it's come in and Any blame on anybody? Are you looking at Bolly? I'll be honest with you. Sorry, Danscape in the comments. I didn't think Bolly covered himself in much glory last night, if I'm honest with you, across the whole game.
Yeah, unfortunately, that moment was an emblematic, I think, of his performance. I mean, he had very sort of Bolly-esque, sort of stout, defensive play, but at times, but there was just moments it just didn't feel like he was quite in the same rhythm as he normally is, and just that acuity to kind of dissect or to kind of diagnose what's going on and quickly react. I mean, he's no spring chicken at this point, is he? But anyway, yeah, I
poor Dan.
I thought that moment, I thought he could have cleared that personally. I mean, when I watched it back, I wasn't able to watch it live because I was in a meeting. But when I watched it back, I just thought, he just kind of sort of loosely, casually stuck his foot out, but it didn't look like there was any intent to try to get the ball out. I mean, maybe he just didn't have enough time to react given the circumstances. But to your point, I don't think you can blame Carlos Miguel much for that. I thought that was a veteran player in terms of Bolly that probably could have done a little bit more with it to avoid that. I mean, both goals in of themselves were very avoidable, I thought. So it's just unfortunate. And that's the kind of match that was going to be, right? Like Raph alluded to, it's just like, they're gonna need to get fluky stuff to really have any chance. And as you kind of pointed out, Greg, before we came on, was just the nature of they wanted to get this to penalties. They wanted to put us in a position like that because they've probably fancied themselves to do it well. But yeah, it was a unfortunate outcome, but yeah, clearly avoidable, I think.
Yeah, I was frustrated. I'm still frustrated. I'm so happy we've gone through because I'd have been really pissed off if we had gone out in the cup last night. I know we did, because it was a game that seemed to have all the ingredients of us going out, because there was the bad pitch, there was the last game under the lights, there was them scoring from a goalkeeper error and us getting back into it, but then letting them back in at a corner when we really should have been clearing it. And then it also had their player getting sent off, so them going down to 10 men, and rightly so, I'll say. It had our backup striker, I don't like calling him backup striker because I think he's better than that. We had Tyro, who played well, going off with a broken nose. I mean, that was a 10 to 15 minute delay. So they were getting cold, and it kind of brought I kind of thought maybe this is going to do us a bit of a favour, actually, because it's going to maybe diffuse some of the Exeter energy. And then our big guns coming on. So, we haven't got much time left on the Exeter game. I'm going to throw it over to you, Paul, to kind of wrap up where you're at with how that kind of panned out. Because I know you were feeling quite pleased that, we put it to one side, we move on, and it's just one of those games in the cup that happens.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a classic FA Cup tie, wasn't it? Like you said, cabbage patch of a pitch. Crowd on your shoulder. Referee was doing his best to help out the lower league team, I think, with a lot of his decisions. But we got through it. I think it was a good experience for some of them young lads who are new to English football. Jota, Soso, and those sort of, and Miguel obviously had his challenges in the game, but hopefully they'll be better for it. I think also as a reminder to the more established players that whoever the opposition, you've got to work bloody hard. And to use the phrase that's been bandied about a few times in the last few weeks, stay humble and not take anything for granted. And look, in the end, the quality shone through in the penalties. Probably, if you look at the match stats, it was a game that we probably could and should have won. And like you guys just said, the goals we conceded were scrappy, but that was how they were always going to probably. If they were going to score, it was going to be that kind of a scrappy goal that we were going to concede. So yeah, look, like you say, we went in there, got the job done ultimately, and put it to one side now, move on, concentrate back on the league. But knowing that there's a really good opportunity in a few weeks' time to progress in the cup with the home game against Ipswich.
We had Jota Silva hitting the post in the late throes of added time, which I thought he should have scored. We had the Wood header from 2 or 3 yards out, which he put straight down their keeper's throat. So the chances were there to really wrap the game up, which was again why I was thinking we've got our chances here and we're not taking them. And I was saying in our group chat, it's going to penalties, we're going out, because I was convinced that it just had that all over it, because I've seen it happen. We've all seen it happen, haven't we? The FA Cup, the magic of the FA Cup is a real thing. It has to be a real thing. When Liverpool can't score away at Plymouth, and I know that, yes, they made changes, but, you'd expect the players that they put out to still be able to perform and score goals. So, we should come away from that and respect Exeter. And I do respect Exeter because they gave everything they could to make it difficult for us. And that's how it should be. I want them to make it difficult for us. They want to, if they're going to go and lie down to Premier League opposition, then what's the point in that? That's the beauty of English football. That's why we have the 4 divisions we've got, because ultimately, you know, these things can happen. Surprises can happen. We're through to the next round, to the 5th round. If we beat Ipswich, we go to the quarters, and then we're hopefully going to have a trip to Wembley or 2. So we'll look forward to welcoming Ipswich to the City Ground for round 5 a little bit later on in a few weeks' time.
The Cheese Trader, based on Grape Lane in York, is a cheese lover's paradise. Home to some wonderful specialty cheeses, relishes and chutneys, and also with a fantastic street food menu. Try their loaded fries or posh cheese on toast. It'll be the best you've ever had. Owned by Forest fan Stu Freestone, the Cheese Trader proudly sponsors Talking Reds. Quote Talking Reds every time to get 10% off your order. The Cheese Trader and Talking Reds, the perfect cheesy mix.
Perfect cheesy mix, 10% off, guys. You know what to do. You know the drill by now. Right, Fulham on Saturday. Forest travelled to Craven Cottage to play the first of 4 rather tricky games, as we're going to be playing Fulham, then Newcastle, then Arsenal, then Man City. And of course, everyone knows that those 4 are the first 4 teams to beat us out of the 5 that have done so. So we want to make sure that we can certainly get some points on the board. Richard, how are you feeling about this one going away to Fulham? Let's get straight into how you're feeling about the game, what you want out of it. Would you take a point now all day long? And let's get straight into team shape and formation.
Yeah, I would definitely take a point. We need to get back to sort of better performances. I mean, it's hard to dismiss, even though the week after when we won 7-0 against Brighton, that was a home match. So, but the last away match we played against Bournemouth was certainly a hot mess. So it'll be great to kind of get back to sort of that away form that we're used to and have shown throughout the season consistently. So yeah, I feel good about what we're going to put on the pitch. I feel good about, especially after seeing last night, just that delta between our first players and the second players, and seeing what kind of quality the first team has, and recognizing the kind of chemistry they have as well. So I feel confident that we can make this a difficult match. We can play the way that we normally play, and we can execute, especially on the defensive end of the pitch, to make things difficult for Fulham, because that's how it went the first match with them. And it was a penalty that made the difference, right? And that's the only penalty we've given up this season. So it's one of those teams that falls within that tier, that bracket of teams that over the last couple of years have been very sort of similar and kind of all sort of, jockeying for that sort of mid-table region. I mean, they're 11 points below us. So on paper and based off of our performance to date, throughout the season, we should beat them, but I would definitely take a point at this stage.
So I've got the FOTMob on the screen, and it shows the lineup from the previous Premier League game against Brighton, where we went with that back 3. Raf, I feel like the back 3 is the way we're going to go this time. I feel that I'm not too sure about what's happening with Callum Hudson-Odoi, and whilst he's iffy, if you like, that it's more likely that we would be potentially playing with the back 3 like we did with Murillo, Morata and Milenkovic. What do you think? Are you expecting it to be a 3, or are you thinking maybe the 4-2-3-1?
So I think, just looking at, again, Mystic megging it and just looking at who travelled, who didn't, who was rested, who wasn't at the cup game, the fact that Morata didn't play seems to indicate that he was being rested for here. If you then couple that with CHO Callum coming back from injury, I think probably he doesn't get thrust into a starting role and we start with a 3 at the back. And it's the thing that, well, even with some tactical blunders by Brighton, but it is the formation that smashed Brighton. Lo and behold, it is actually Nuno's favourite formation, I think, that he used quite a lot at Wolves. So the fact that it worked really a lot with Brighton might open up his mind to go, well, actually, the team can pull this off now. We've now got the defenders to be able to pull it off, and the other players. So we might see it a little bit more. But I think if Callum's not fit, these are the best 11 players that we can put on the pitch. And so probably will likely be the starting lineup. I think the question mark was, does Danilo start? But given the fact that he was just back from injury and he was thrust into the starting 11 at Brighton, I don't see any reason why he's not going to be thrust straight into the starting 11 again for this match.
He started last night, so I was surprised to see him start, thinking he would start on Saturday as well.
But again, he's not like the other players. It's not like he's played 20 games so far this season. I just think, and he's super young. I don't see it any massive. And he didn't take hits, whereas Anderson and Gibbs-White got a whack yesterday as well. He didn't. But this is my other thing as well, just though, if he needs more games because he needs to get the fear out. And I cited something that a couple of other people, I think Emma said it again as well, but like looking at this is last night, Danilo didn't fly into tackles again. And I do think he needs to he needs to be on the pitch and he needs to get into a few tackles to dispel this fear that he's evidently got, like any human would have after the horrendousness of his injury.
He's got to watch Days of Thunder, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's got to watch Days of Thunder.
Exactly.
It's got to be Cold Trickle on Days of Thunder, on the game on the outside, go for the smoke, push through.
Exactly. But that's it. Just put him on and keep him going and keep him running until he engages. So it'll be absolutely fine. I quite like this. Fulham, give me the heebie-jeebies. I've been to Craven Cottage now enough times to watch Forest, especially when we've been in the lower leagues, to just come away so disappointed every single time. And traumatised, Marinakis style, like I was at the 5-0, freaking throwing my ticket into a bush somewhere, leaving early as well from that last debacle. So we are owed by our team a good performance at Craven Cottage, right?
Yeah.
And Fulham, well, we'll come on to when I look at Fulham, but I'll tell you a little bit about Fulham in a little bit of why I don't think it's outside the realms of possibility.
So, Paul, what about you? I mean, the formation that is on the screen for those that can't see it is the lineup, as I said, that played against Brighton with Nico and Aina, Danilo and Anderson across the midfield, Gibbs-White behind Wood and Alanga playing in that kind of inside right channel. Do you think you're going to see, or we're going to see, any different people lining up in that team, or do you think there's pretty much that?
Yeah, I think that's the team for me, isn't it? I think the clue was there, as Raf said last night, with Moretto not starting yesterday. That said to me straight away that this was the lineup we're probably going to go with on Saturday. Like you say, Danilo maybe question mark, but I think for reasons as I explained, I think it's just about getting minutes into his legs at the minute, isn't it? I think he came off 60 odd minutes last night, did he? I can't remember exactly when he came off, but it seemed like a pre-planned move to bring him off at the time that we did, with a view to keeping him fresh for Saturday. So yeah, I'd be comfortable with that team. I think I know Russ going to come on to it. I think Fulham, just looking back at their most recent results, they've blown a bit hot and cold, a little bit like Brighton in a sense, in that I think their last 5 results, they've obviously had a great win at Newcastle. Then they lost at home to Man U, didn't they? Lost away at West Ham, beat somebody else, I can't remember, and then drew at home. Drew against Ipswich.
Drew against Ipswich. Beat West Ham. No.
Beat West Ham. Beat Leicester. So there's 2 wins, 2 draws. 2 wins, 2 defeats, and a draw in the last 5 games. So yeah, blown a bit hot and cold. So yeah, I think like you guys, I would probably take a point, but I think we're definitely good for a point there, and maybe something more. But yeah, I was at the 5-0 last year as well, so it would be good to see us erase that from the memory. Yeah,
I was at the 5-0 yes, and it was horrible. Yeah, it was terrible. Paul, do you think? I mean, a lot of the players that played in that game, I'm trying to think who's going to be potentially playing on Saturday, because Aina had his worst game.
Bournemouth the other week.
Up until that, I think he's allowed 1 a season. So there you go. But I mean, do you think there's anything in it that the players are like, look, we got done 5-0 here, and it actually feels like it was ages ago, because obviously it's well over a year, because it was before the Christmas in the last season. So we're talking probably a good 14, 15 months ago since we actually lost that game. So is there anything in it for you, Paul, with the players wanting to make sure that they really put in a performance to make us happy? Proud?
I hope so. I mean, I guess it wasn't under Nuno, was it? So you won't have close sort of experience of the feelings of that. But I guess you just need to look at what happened last time we were away from home. This season against Bournemouth. So again, from a point of view of wanting to put some wrongs right for the travelling fans who go to, and I appreciate obviously there was the similar group obviously would have been there last night as well. But yeah, you can maybe say even use the fact that the fans got in at 4 a.m. this morning on a Tuesday, Tuesday morning, Wednesday morning. Nuno can use that as a motivation to say, look, those guys are going to be back down in London again, the same crowd, I'd imagine. So, do we owe them one to say thank you for the support on Tuesday night? Absolutely. So plenty of things that Nuno can use to get the players up. And as you say, those that were part of the 5-0 at Fulham last year, hopefully we'll use that as motivation as well.
I think so. Okay, let's go into a bit more detail about Fulham and Forest. Danscape not with us, feeling quite unwell, but around in the comments still. He has provided us with a little bit of a graph for Richard to tell us about.
Yeah, so Dan's wonderful, and I apologize if I don't do you justice, Dan, if you're watching and listening still. But shot conversion versus chance creation. So for those who are listening and not able to see the graphic, it's basically set up where you have chance creation kind of going vertical, you have shot creation going horizontal, and it's just looking at where players on both teams are falling in relation to those two categories and two element metrics. So as we look on the left-hand side, a lot of players kind of congregated in that bottom left corner, so they're not creating a lot of chances, they're not getting a lot of converted shots. But then as you move up, there's some, usual suspects that you would imagine just based off of what we've seen and how they performed on the pitch. So like for Forest, for guys who are creating a lot, but, have a low shot conversion, they don't have a lot of goals this season at this stage. You've got Anthony Elanga, you've got Elliot Anderson, you've got Morgan Gibbs-White, you've got Callum Hudson-Odoi. Then for Fulham, you've got in that quadrant, you've got Andreas Pereira, you've got Alex Iwobi, Emile Smith-Rowe, and Adama Traore. So guys that we're very familiar with, and we kind of imagine that's probably where they would land. As you start to move more to the right, you start to see guys who are more attacking midfielders as well as strikers sort of pop up. So in the middle, basically between, chance creation, shot conversion, you've got players for Fulham like Harry Wilson, Raul Jimenez. And then as you move all the way to the right, the anomalous Mr. Chris Wood, right? So Joseph's favorite, the handsome man that is Chris Wood, we all have seen what he's done in terms of when the opportunities come. He's very clinical in his finishing. So, we've got, it's good to see that, obviously, because it puts a lot of expectation and or confidence that once those moments come, which they will come, I think he's able to convert those very, very, very effectively. So he's not a creative player, but he's a great guy and he's sort of classic striker in terms of when he gets in front of goal, he can finish well. So that's kind of how this is all set up. And, it's good to see that our players, there's a nice sort of like grouping of these guys that seem to exceed what Fulham's doing in key areas in the midfield, especially at the wings, attacking, building, creating, doing the things that they're supposed to be doing. And it's great to see that we have somewhat of an advantage in that area.
So Chris Wood hopefully will continue to score goals out of nothing, because that seems to be the key to his season and our season so far. Yes, you will notice that the Christmas tree has returned behind me. It never really went away, but it sometimes glitches. So I move it to the side when we're talking about FA Cup, but it's back for Premier League action. Don't worry, Bruce. Christmas tree is there. Let's have our scouting report now from Raf.
Send them back to East London! We send them back!
I hope anybody's not stupid enough to write us off.
What have you got for us, Raf?
So just having a look at the kind of the opposition, how they usually set up and everything else as well. But what we usually have we're facing is trying to guess what the manager's going to do against us. But what's really pleasing to see is a little bit like we've been. It's really predictable, and they play exactly the same formation that we've been playing all season. Which, for those that are listening but not watching, you can see from the last 3 games that they've had, which have been Newcastle, against Man U, and against Leicester, they have played our favoured 4-2-3-1, right? And for the players that you look at it, they've got a completely settled, because Tete's injured kind of long term. So, and he's been really good for them. but their keeper and their back line is going to be Leno in goal. You're going to have Castagne as their right back, Anthony Robinson, who is a serious danger, pacey fullback for them on the left-hand side, and then Bassi and Anderson in the middle of the park. I can't see really any changes to that. Tete is still injured, and that's their kind of defensive unit. Very much like last season, where they basically only used 5 defenders pretty much the entire season, which is why they were so good at defense, because they had that consistency in their team, in their back four. Middle of the park, bizarrely, Pereira, in my opinion, is probably one of their best players, but he's for some reason not in favour at the moment. And it could be they're just kind of bringing him slowly back from injury, because he came on with a kind of about 72, 73 minutes against Newcastle. But you've had Lucic and Sander Berger in the middle of the park as there too. And again, consistency for those last 2 games. But it wouldn't surprise me, given Pereira is their bit of quality in midfield. He might be back. But if he is, I don't know as to his exact fitness to be, again, some steely challenges into him in midfield might go well. Then we have a look at, well, if we go straight up the top, you've got Jimenez that's going to be their striker, and I don't see really any change with that. And his form has been a bit up and down, but he's actually on pretty good form at the moment. And he certainly has found his goal-scoring touch again, which really he didn't have last season. This season, he's been a lot more productive. Smith Rowe, who, again, familiar to us, we thought we might be able to nab him at some point, but he ended up at Fulham. And he's going to play in that 10 slot. He's really getting used to playing in that 10 slot. And again, I would be concerned about him. Again, creativity. He's got a goal in him as well. So he is a bit of a threat, and we will need to look at that. Iwobi, now he's a bit, do you know what? He's not as hot as he has been. This season, around the middle part of the season, he was unplayable. I think he scored like 5 games back to back or something mental like that. He, again, pace merchant, but his end product has got a lot better. So if you're doing your similarities to Elanga, you've kind of got that going on from an Iwobi perspective. But he does drift inside quite a lot to cause a bit of chaos with Smith Rowe. And then Harry Wilson's played 2 of the last 3, but he is injured now. So Traore, another pace merchant pretty much in strength on their right-hand side. So if you have a look at it, between Traore, Iwobi, Robinson, there is a lot of pace that is coming, and they are very good at breaking at speed as well. But the good news is they're at home, we're away. The onus will be on them to have the ball more than us, which suits us. Doesn't necessarily suit them, even if we do think back to Kearney coming on Sky Sports and bemoaning the fact that we seem to do really well with no possession, and he doesn't think it's the right way to play football. But other than that, we do actually have a fairly good chance. And as to Paul said, their form is very erratic. They haven't put 2 wins together in a long time. So they did win their last game. Are they due to lose this game? If they kind of win, lose, as it were, we can see where we go. But ultimately, that's really where Fulham are. It's quite predictable. We kind of know what we're going to get. So I do think it's something where Nuno and the team can prepare really well tactically. And we've seen from Nuno, when he does get his tactics spot on, he can do a really good number on the opposition manager. And I do feel this might be one of those games.
I was going to mention their left-hand side, and Dan Scape's picking it up in the comments as well, with Robinson being, he's made the most assists, I think, or one of the most assists as a fullback. Richard, I mean, do you feel, Richard, that is going to be up against, excuse me, Ola Aina, who, if we play with the back 3, will be operating more in a wing-back position? Is that dangerous for us, knowing that Robinson is so powerful coming down that left-hand side, or maybe we need to double up? Is that maybe a reason why you might bring Dominguez in and put him on the right-hand side? Not instead of Aina, of course, but maybe in a different kind of shape. Yeah,
I mean, I tend to think that when Aina's at his peak, right, not what we saw against Bournemouth, as we talked about, certainly not what we saw against Fulham last season. Nobody really was up for that match, unfortunately, last season. But when he's at his best, he's elite on one-on-one defending. And he's one of the few guys, I think, in terms of pace, power, agility, all of that can match Anthony Robinson step for step. So I'm not as worried because I have a feeling he's going to play much better in this match. I think he's going to sort of recognize how he just didn't play like himself in that match against Bournemouth, and he didn't execute things that he normally can do without even thinking. And so I tend to believe that we don't need that Dominguez coverage. I think Murata will do a reasonable job. His issue is always in the air. On the ground, he's actually pretty good. You know, he has that one nervy moment that we're all accustomed to and was talked about, you know, coming out of Benfica. But for the most part, I think he's going to manage that very well. But that left side, because as Dan pointed out and you pointed out, 42% of their attack is coming from that left. And, you know, but I like the fact that we're going to set up, because they're going to, if you look at how they're scoring goals, they've 28 of their goals. So like 90% of them have come from open play. So I like that we're going to kind of add some numbers into that midfield, really strengthen the edges so that we don't give them a lot of space. And we play our game, we restrict the lanes, we do what we do, which get those blocks, get those interceptions like we're very capable of doing, and maintain that compact shape, which I'm sure we will do, as Nuno's always talking about. I mean, I think we can really shut them down. It'll probably be kind of if we win, it's a close win scenario, which I'm sure we'll get on when we do our score predictions. But yeah, I think we're going to be all right.
One thing that I haven't gone into much detail on yet, because I wanted to kind of bring it up around this time, is Taiwo Awoniyi, and the fact that we didn't sign a striker in the window or the summer before. We've decided to go with Woods, and Taiwo was our two options. And lo and behold, Taiwo has now picked up what was a nasty injury. It looks like he could be out for anything between 12 to 24 days, depending on the protocol when it comes to concussion and stuff like that. So how worried are you, really, now that we are down to one striker, out-and-out striker, that is? Do you foresee any issues, I guess, is the question?
It's just got to look at that graph that you had up in terms of Wood and how far ahead of everybody else he is in terms of shot conversion, and you take him out of the picture, and there's an obvious gap there in the team, isn't there? I hope Taiwo, just word on him, hope he's okay, and hope we do see him back. I guess if it's the lower end of that 12 days, then potentially be back and available for selection for the Arsenal game on the 25th. So fingers crossed he's back for that, because he's got quite a good record against Arsenal, hasn't he? He's got he can bully their defenders. So if he gets a few minutes in that game, I think he'll be up for that. So yeah, hopefully he's okay. It is a concern. I guess we'll have to, if let's hope that Wood makes it through 90 minutes on Saturday without the need to take him off. But if we did, then it's going to involve obviously a makeshift striker filling in, whether that be someone like Jota, whether obviously Alanga's sort of has played a bit more advanced in the last game, didn't he? And could do that job potentially. Although I think historically, when Alanga's played as a sort of a lone striker, he's sort of struggled a little bit. But that may have been to do with just generally his form. But now he's got the bit between his teeth. He might be a bit more effective. So yeah, look, it's a concern, but it is what it is. We've got to deal with it. And as I say, hopefully, touchwood, Taiwo's absence is only a short one, and we can come back, onto the bench as the next option in the not too distant future.
How are we going to win this one then, guys? I mean, we're going into this game third in the Premier League. We've just beaten Brighton at home 7-0. We have the most informed striker probably available to us. Forget last night. I think Raf summed it up really well earlier. It's with all the stuff that he said about pitch and them being up for it more than us and all that kind of stuff that goes with being in the FA Cup. We're back in the Premier League now. We've got to shake our heads and get ourselves back into action. The return of Milenkovic, Murillo, and Aina into the side, I think, is going to make a huge difference to us. We play how we play. I don't think we're going to go into this being anything other than that low possession Forest team that we're used to seeing and hitting teams on the counter and the transition. So I'm expecting the game to be with Fulham having the majority of the ball and trying to break us down in their wing areas, particularly their left-hand side. So with all that in mind, let's get some score predictions then from you. I'll come to you first, Richard. What are you thinking?
I'm going to say it's a gutty sort of like defensive battle where we end up scoring on the counter and we go up one. I'm going to say an Olanga goal because I just like him. If we go with the formation that you put up there on the FOT mob, it gives him that freedom to choose his matchups. Because I think if he's just going to go 1-on-1 all game against Anthony Robinson, that's probably not going to, because he's a very heady footballer, right? Very experienced. I think he's probably not going to see a massive amount of success, but given the opportunity to kind of roam and sort of pick his matchups will be very effective for him. So I'm going to go 1-0. We're going to flip the script on him. Not from a penalty, but we're going to flip the script, and we lost 1-0 to them earlier in the season. I think we're going to win 1-0.
Okay, thank you. Raf, what are you saying?
1-1.
Short and sweet, straight to the point. I think you're at the game, aren't you, on Saturday? Is that right?
Yeah, I'll be down there. Anyone else down there, come say hi.
Okay, so Raf's at the game on Saturday. I couldn't get tickets, unfortunately, so I won't make this one. So Richard says 1-0. Raf is going for the 1-1 draw. Paul Morley.
Yeah, just looking at Fulham's home form in particular. So the last 7 home games, they've only won 1, which was against Brighton. They lost against Wolves and Man U, and they had 4 draws in there against Southampton, Ipswich, Bournemouth, and Arsenal. So they've drawn a lot of home games. We haven't drawn much of late. We're probably due a draw. So I'm going to go for a Desmond 2-2.
Desmond 2-2. Okay. I think that we will win this. I really do. I'm not ready to be on the side of our season being in any kind of jeopardy from anything that might have happened yesterday. I think we're going to win 2-0. I think we're going to go back to a clean sheet. I think we're going to hit them on the break and get our early goal, and they'll have to come at us and we'll catch them again. So I'm going to say 2-0 to Forest because I'm ever the optimist, but I still believe in this team. I still believe in what Nuno's set them up to be. And, there's still a lot of football left to be played in this Premier League season before we can say anything other than, Forest have still been fantastic and European football is on the horizon. You did, Richard, provide me with another quick slide as well, just to kind of add it in before we close it off. Was this something you were going to take us through?
Yeah, I mean, so some of this stuff's probably going to be pretty intuitive just based off of what we've seen these teams do in the past and how we played each other. So we're just looking at a quick summary coming up from SofaScore. So if you look at how they average their scoring model in terms of how they rate their players, we're like dead on 6.97 both clubs. So that shouldn't shock us because they've got quality players. We've got quality players. Goals scored, we've got the advantage by 4. We've got 40. They have 36. Goals conceded. This is where we obviously have the advantage. We've had more clean sheets. So if you go to the next slide, you can see goals per game is higher for us, just slightly. Shots on target, about the same, 4.8 for us, 4.7 for them. Big chances per game, 2.5 for us, 2.3. So there's a lot of evenness with how we do things, and this shouldn't shock anybody in terms of the passing stats. We're 40% possession, they're 53% possession. The one thing that's interesting on this slide to me was that they're highly accurate in terms of how they move the ball, and that's that's evidenced by their 28 goals, which I was wrong on my percentage. It was about 78% of their goals are scored from open play. So they're highly accurate in terms of the moving the ball around, 84.4%. Some of that could be just that they're, it's the usual side to side, back, side to side, slightly moving forward, maybe back, side to side, those kinds of possession, movements we typically see with a lot of high possession teams, but they are very accurate on long balls. So something to be careful of in terms of how that's managed, from Morato's perspective and how he deals with engagement aerially, because we know it's been a challenge. Next slide. And then defending, this shouldn't shock anybody. We've got green on our side through and through. So we've got 10 clean sheets to their 4. We've got goals conceded per game. We're lower. We saw that in the total goal out that they've scored compared to ours, or total goals given up rather. And then interceptions per game, we've got the advantage there, 9.3 to 8.9. We've got the advantage to number of tackles we made, number of clearances we made, as I was talking about earlier, being able to get in front of passes or get, or rather that's the blocks and interceptions, but being able to get the ball out and get it out of harm's way is something we've done very effectively the majority of the season. And then saves per game, 3.1 to their 2.8. I don't know if there's one more slide. I don't think that there is.
No, that was it.
So it just shows that we're pretty close in terms of our metrics, with some slight advantage to us, especially on the shot conversion side, as we saw with Dan's graphic with Wood. And then on the defensive side of the ball, we tend to be more effective.
Okay, just about out of time, guys, but one thing that's come out today, club news, is that Socrates Kominakis has had his position as director removed. So he is no longer a director at the club. He is a shareholder still. So this was circulating from, I think, Martin Ziegler and others have put this out on X. It says termination details. I mean, that's pretty standard jargon and wordage on Companies House. When someone stops being a director of a company, it just says termination. He is a minority shareholder. And until we learn anything about his shares being sold or not, then we assume that he remains as such. Raf, I think you were talking before we came on. You had a little line on this.
Yeah, there's been a lot of people reading into this a little bit and trying 1 + 1 = 3. I think is happening quite a lot. All I would say is that over this season, we have seen a lot of movement, a little bit like a cabinet reshuffle that's going on. I don't think it's a particularly bad thing. But I generally think that the club is growing up, and who sits on that board is a factor of that. So I think this might just be a little bit of shuffling around, moving some new faces in, and us really, really moving forward. Again, though, I'm not an expert on what every single board member was doing, what their credentials are, so I can't say that with any accuracy. That's just what it feels like. For those that were saying this is a move because if we're going to be in Europe and Ollie are going to be in Europe and we're both going to be in Champions League, we can't both be in the Champions League with Marinakis owning both clubs. So some people think that there is a cunning move underfoot to change the ownership structures of the clubs, etc., to allow that to happen. This is not that right now because ultimately it's Marinakis owning more shares. These shares haven't been reallocated. It's just the actual role that's been removed. So it isn't that, but I wouldn't be surprised in the future if it's becoming increasingly clear that we are going to be in the same competition, that something might be done as a temporary measure ownership-wise.
Yeah, Danscape says it's most likely related to UEFA competition rules about having different boards at different clubs, pretty similar to what you were just saying. So we'll keep an eye on that. But yeah, it does feel like movement behind the scenes that's been happening at the club has been for the benefit of the club, and people are being moved into different areas. We've had Edu on the horizon, potentially of coming in to the Marinakis empire as well. So yeah, there's more things happening. I'm sure that we'll find out in due course. And an update on the stadium is pretty much that we're looking at 2026 now before any kind of work goes underway. I know this is old news. It was out before the weekend, and we haven't mentioned it. But the City Ground development isn't going to be anything happening until summer 2026, and we got the England-Senegal game at the City Ground in June as well to look forward to. Okay, we've gone way over. We're into proper added time. So, Paul, anything you want to say before we depart?
I was just going to say, whatever happens on Saturday, we're still going to be third in the league after 25 games. Win,
Right.
lose or draw. And just looking at from a stats point of view, there's been 32 completed seasons in the Premier League. And the team that sat in third place after 25 games has finished in the top 5 31 out of 32 times. And the only one that missed out was Villa in 2009. They finished 6th. And that was after a run of taking only 11 points from their last 13 games. And I'm pretty confident that we have it more about us than to go on a run like that, even if we do end up the wrong side of the result on Saturday. So yeah, plenty of reasons to be very, very optimistic and cheerful for the European travels come the autumn.
I do like it when you come out with these, the last 25 seasons, the last 30 seasons, because you do that a lot, and I like it. But it always makes me think it is going to be so Forest to be the one that bucks that trend. So I'm hoping it's not going to be, but we'll have to see. Raf, we're well out of time. Briefly, anything you want to say?
Just very, very quickly, like Paul was saying, let's all not lose our heads. It's a very, very long season. And there was something really striking I did see was the fact that you usually think, oh, we're only here because we do 1-0s and we're kind of just surviving and we're just surviving and it's got to break at some point. You look at the goal difference, it's a really good indicator. We have exactly the same goal difference as Man City and as Newcastle and as Bournemouth. We are here on merit with our overall game completely and utterly. So it's not all just falling off. We're not lucky to be here. We just need to keep the faith and don't have a massive panic attack if we don't get all 3 points at Fulham.
Thank you very much to both of you for joining us. Richard, your final words before we go?
I'm just glad to see we've got Ghost of we got the random Forest Ghost now, and now we've got Ghost of Forest Present, which is you, Craig. Now you're the Ghost of Forest Present from that Christmas tree. So I feel very confident now that that's made its way into what we do regularly. That we're going to have a good showing on Saturday now. So thank you for that. Thanks for the Christmas tree.
I went on about it so much I can't not have it up. I'm kind of stuck with it for now. But look, listen. I'm a firm believer that this season has all the makings of it being an incredibly good season. We are there by the good things that we've done on the pitch, off the pitch as well. So Forest have got everything to be hopeful for the wheels to truly come off, truly come off. We're going to have to start losing a whole shitload of games, and other clubs are going to have to start winning a whole load of games as well. And in the Premier League, it just doesn't happen like that. So I've got every faith that we're going to be continuing our Premier League journey on Saturday as we take on Fulham away at Craven Cottage. Come on, you Reds. We'll see you next time.
Come join Greg and Richard right here on Talking